Hello, this is Isaiah Everin, a level designer at the Guildhall at SMU. I'm part of cohort 23 and will be graduating in May of 2016. Today I'd like to present to you my level for Half-Life 2 Episode 2, and it's called The Crow House. This is a level I designed in Level Design 6, a course focused on thinking outside the box, where we went into Source Engine and we were encouraged to make things that are a bit more unconventional, that aren't necessarily something that fit within the normal game structure or game design of Half-Life 2. Some students went with things like a side-scrolling platformer or a top-down shooter, but I decided to create a narration-focused level, and I was inspired by games like Dear Esther and The Stanley Parable, which were both originally made in Source as well. I wanted to create a level that focuses on a narrator that talks you through what you're going through and brings the level to life through voice acting, and mostly just focuses on some exploration as opposed to particularly involved gameplay. We had about 6 weeks to make these levels, so it wasn't a lot of time for the scale of the levels we had to make and all the scripting and environmental visual stuff we had to do. And for some context, this is the last thing, just for some context, the story is entirely inspired by and takes place in a universe called the SCP Foundation. It's not taking place in the Half-Life universe. Instead, it's inspired by this collaborative horror fiction website that is full of these articles about these paranormal artifacts that are dangerous and strange, and the story and the narration is all meant to fit the tone of the articles you can find on this website. And without further ado, we're just gonna hop right in and see what I've made, and I'll be providing some details about it, as well as talking between the narration lines that we will see playing in the level.
This is Agent Yellow Fisk overseeing Experiment 2674-4. We have Subject D3671 on the monitor. He is equipped with a standard Foundation environmental suit with a headset, oxygen supply, emergency rations, wound healing system, and flashlight. Before the experiment begins, the subject will open the dark gray door.
So as you can see, we are dropped right into this strange concrete room. This is an experiment chamber at the Foundation, a paranormal agency that deals with artifacts that are often dangerous and bizarre, and what they do is they use what are called Class D subjects, who are death row inmates, and they use them as experimental guinea pigs in trying to interact with these paranormal artifacts.
In doing so, the subject reveals an empty closet. Opening any door while holding the object SCP-2674-A, otherwise known as the crowbar, will create a portal to another location known as SCP-2674-B, the Crow House. The subject will now pick up the crowbar and open the closet door.
So, the entirety of my mission that I've created here is context-based narration.
Entered the Crow House.
Context-based narration and scripted events, as you could just see, things like walking through triggers. Also, we have things like look triggers, which, for instance, right there.
In previous experiments, small, unidentified creatures can be seen walking in the air ducts.
As you can see, that was a look trigger that triggered that alien walking past and the narration happening, and then we have another trigger right here. All of these events are scripted using Hammer, which is the editor for the Source Engine, using Hammer's input-output entity system. So there's just like dozens of different kinds of entities that are used to make a lot of different stuff happen in the source engine. Uh, for instance, an AI schedule made this little head crab move through the vents. A look at trigger caused this event to happen. And then a series of entities that are like conditional entities and some other stuff is what controls the narration.
As we've seen before, the first room of the Crow House somehow appears representative of an event in the subject's history. In this case, it appears to be the quadruple homicide that led to the subject's incarceration on death row. Based on previous experiments, in order to see further into the Crow House, the subject must find an object related to the memory at hand and place it inside the stone pedestal. A creature in the vents. It seems to be observing the subject.
So the focus of the Crow House is to bring to life the memories of the people who enter it, but that's what I was going for when designing this sort of paranormal haunted house location. But the tone of the SCP Foundation is such that you don't always know what's going on.
The subject is looking for something relevant to the murders, perhaps a weapon or something of a sentimental value.
You don't always know exactly what's going on. You don't always know why what's happening is happening. The focus of Foundation articles is often to be sort of confusing and mysterious and strange.
Foundation experiments have not yet been able to pin down exactly why the Crow House requires these offerings.
And so that's what I'm going for with this story of this strange location called the Crow House. For a second, I just want to talk about, so in the source editor, Hammer, it's a BSP focused engine where everything that's not like a detailed mesh is actually made out of BSP. So like these rooms that we'll be going through, I had to build myself. Going down to the details of like the trim edges along the floors and ceilings, the beams across the ceilings, all the textures that are used for the walls, floors, ceilings, etc. I had to manually place and decide what I wanted this room to look like. And then a lot of the meshes in this level are actually from Counter-Strike Source, since Half-Life 2 doesn't have a huge variety of indoor decoration. Not too surprisingly, given the content of that game. So things like this television and these bookshelves and various other stuff I actually got from Counter-Strike. And that was really helpful in bringing this level to life.
Subject's history shows that as a youth he ran away from home due to an abusive household.
Away from home.
The presence of these pedestals in the interior of the Crow House seem to imply that whoever created these artifacts is interested in the psyches and histories of the subjects who enter. Creatures and events definitely appear to be observing the subject.
So we'll see some more context-based stuff like looking at these head crabs always triggers Agent Yellowfisk to comment on them. And
the subject should find something maybe relevant to when he ran away from home.
And this one actually will follow us back and forth across the room. And I wanted to give a feeling like these creatures are somehow part of this house. And obviously they're head crabs from Half-Life 2. They have their own context in that game, but I wanted to put them in sort of a new context where they're these strange little alien observers in this paranormal house. So these pedestals actually have a little interesting scripting system. This is like the core gameplay is just exploration, finding the objects we're supposed to place inside of here. But if I place something that is not meant to go in there, the pedestal will reject it, just send it flying out. And this was to communicate to the player, you know, that that's not what you're supposed to be doing, because it's a pretty basic gameplay, just
that the subject brought with him when he ran away from home.
finding objects related to the story at hand. I had the most fun and felt the most happy about this environment. Again, the structure of the room is made out of BSP, so all this wooden siding around the edges of this is BSP separate from the walls. I really was happy with this environment above the other ones the most. But we're going to jump down into this strange hole.
What? Records show that 4 years after the subject ran away, his mother and sister died in hurricane flooding.
So with this room, I was looking at bringing to life a more another traumatic memory from the subject you're playing as. Again, he's a death row inmate, and so I wanted to show how
There should be something somewhere in the room related to the subject's mother or sister. Perhaps an object that belonged to one of them.
I wanted to show how he ended up the way he is. Looking at the last room was supposed to evoke the abusive household he grew up in. This room is where his mother and sister died in a hurricane, and this like movement back and forth is supposed to evoke sort of this really stressful scenario. But actually, in practice, this ended up being my least successful area of the level. Players were stressed out by it, but not in really the way I was looking for. It was a lot more...
Perhaps it belonged to his sister.
It was a lot more problematic than I was going for people to get through. This ladder came up out of the floor after we found the correct object. And then another ladder comes up and lets us move on.
In this instance, the playhouse seems somewhat more complex than the previous experiments.
So yeah, we're gonna head into this dark staircase in just a second, but I just want to point out things like this picture frame are actually also made out of BSP, because I needed something to decorate the walls, but didn't have a lot of options with the meshes on hand, and I felt like, you know, these sort of odd blank canvases fit the tone. And then again, there's just rain coming from the ceiling, which is hinting at the stormy, flooded room that we just came out of.
The current theory at the foundation is that the playhouse is analyzed the user's psyche from other dimensions.
So as you can hear, the narration is becoming staticky and breaking up as we enter this strange staircase. And the point there is he's actually starting to give some theories about how the Foundation thinks the Grow House works and what is going on, but a big focus of SCP articles is actually cutting out the parts that explain the meat of like what the paranormal artifacts are doing or why they're doing what they're doing, because it's all about sustaining the mystery and this sort of thriller allure of whatever is happening in a given article. And so when we get to this like dramatic climax, we start to lose our connection with the guy who's sort of been grounding us and helping us somewhat understand what we're going through. And then we see this strange alien exterior hinting at the fact that we are in another dimension. This isn't the SCP Foundation's headquarters anymore. We're someplace else, and we see this strange button and the word freedom.
recent tensions.
And then we get teleported to this closet that's similar to the one that we saw at the beginning of the level. And again, like things like teleporting the player to this location, making the stairs disappear and slide down. These are all relatively simple conditional scripted events where nothing super complicated is happening from a programming perspective, but there are a lot of different logical entities in Hammer that I have to finagle and work with and connect to the narration system to make all these different things happen. So we're going to go into this last room. And that's the signal that we definitely lost connection with our handler, Agent Yellow Fisk. And we see that this room is almost evocative of the first one we were in, a strange testing chamber, but here the materials are different. It's of a more alien construction, and then we see these alien head crabs hanging from the ceiling and watching us in the vents. And when we walk up to this window, show us. We see some more head crabs behind the window, and they're sort of just pacing back and forth, and also in the same concrete interior. And the idea here is that the Foundation is always testing these SCP objects using these Class D death row subjects that we're playing as. And the Crow House is some sort of psychic location that's replaying the memories of the people who go inside and bringing them to life. But here it's analyzing the Foundation. It's going like, oh, you want to experiment on me? Well, I'm going to experiment on you and see what you do when I put you in a situation that you're not prepared for. So it says experiment or release. So if we hit one of these buttons, it lights the head crab inside on fire, and each of these buttons do that and actually kill those guys inside. And we can also attack these guys through the vents. Can't really reach those guys up here, but if we kill all three of them or become hostile towards them, they all start attacking us, and the screen, like, you have like a dozen, 24 head crabs just jumping at your head, attacking you, and if that goes on for a while, you fade to black, you get teleported outside the room, and the experiment ends on this very like bizarre and violent note. But we're gonna go for the more peaceful resolution here. Yes. We hit the button, the window opens, theoretically freeing them. All these vents open, freeing them, and they fall from the ceiling and all stare at the doorway. And the idea is, whatever you did, seems like the Crow House is happy with the choice that you made.
And that concludes experiment 2674-4. The subject appears to have exited the Crow House without any apparent harm, despite falling down a set of stairs at the end there. Psychological testing will begin in the next 24 hours, and all experimental data will be passed along to B-Team for further analysis. The subject will now return the crowbar to the podium.
So what we can do here, I just want to pause real quick and explain, is the idea is that Agent Yellow Fist actually, since your signal broke up, he didn't see the end of the experiment. You're the only one that knows about what happened at the end, even though you don't really understand necessarily what is going on. Again, evoking the mysterious, supernatural nature of this mission and experiment. But right now what you can do is he asks you to put the crowbar back on the podium, and you can do that. But also, there's a guard here that's like watching to make sure that that's what you do, and since you have this weapon in hand, you can choose to attack him, and all of those things have different outcomes. If he hits you several times, he'll actually knock you out, and the mission will come to an ending. If you put the crowbar down on the pedestal, and that's like a peaceful resolution, and the mission just the experiment comes to a conclusion. But we're gonna do the more violent ending here, which is what actually I think 100% of
Subject appears
playtesters did.
unable or unwilling to return the crowbar. Submissive force authorized.
All the playtesters I had play this level ended up attacking this guard, often without even letting Agent Yellow Fisk finish talking. They just kind of assumed that they should do that, which was a interesting outcome and says a lot about player psychology. So at the very end there, you can see the whole room start shaking, lights start flickering, and the idea is like, you just use this unknown, strange artifact that opens dimensional doors to kill someone, and that had some major ramifications that are being hinted at by that last sequence. So, yeah. All of this, again, goes in tone with the SCP website, which I definitely would recommend if you're interested in that kind of fiction, looking at. There's a lot of really good stories on there, and I got a lot of really good inspiration for making this mission that I just showed off. But yeah, that's the Crow House. I hope you enjoyed watching if you stuck all the way through to the ending here. If you're interested in learning more about its development, some more details about how it was made, you can find those on my portfolio website, isaiaheverin.com. If you'd like to play the level yourself, that's also available on my portfolio website, as well as another video which I'll just give a full playthrough of the level without my commentary in case someone who really, I don't know, if you really want to see a playthrough with just focusing on the story and the gameplay, you can go ahead and watch that. Anyways, again, I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.